In this lecture, we're going to move on back to the timeline, the real heart of Create Studio. So we're going to look at how to more or less animate that character. The problem is it's very difficult to make a fine line between bringing the character in, working with the timeline, and animating. So we're going to kind of move between all of those things, and hopefully it'll all come together seamlessly. So let's jump over to Create Studio. Here we are in Create Studio, and my penguin finally showed up. So let's take the penguin and we'll say fit to canvas, so we'll get it up just a little bit better. Actually, what happens if we go expand? Oh, that is too big. So let's fit him to canvas. Okay, now what happens whenever you bring a character in, or any element that can be animated, in fact, any element can be animated, so any element, is that it creates a bar down here on the timeline. So let's play with the timeline. I see the penguin here, and it's visible. If I wink out the eye, it disappears. So that's the way that you can... One of the things you might want to do is you put together a bunch of elements and you got them all together in animation. You go, I don't really want that, but I don't want to delete the layer because I might pull it in later. Is you just wink it out, and it won't appear in the final render. The next thing we can do with the penguin is we can lock it. Now watch this bar over here that's selected. When we lock it, it becomes unhighlighted and becomes this dash thing. We cannot modify the penguin now. So what you do is you bring in a bunch of layers, and you've got all of these animated elements, and then you lock the ones that you don't want to have changed. So as you get them finished, you keep locking elements and you add new elements that you're working with to the top. Now the other thing that you can do, I've unlocked that, is that I can put this kind of visible in the timeline. It will stay visible here, so it's unlike the eye, but it'll take it out of the timeline if I click this, and it disappears. Now to bring it back, I unclick this to bring it back, and I unclick that thing. Now when I click that to eliminate all the things that have the binoculars on it, it doesn't disappear because it doesn't have binoculars on it. Now up here at the very top is stuff that you can use for everything. So here I can remove everything, all of the elements. In fact, to show this to you, let's bring in a little text. So we have a second element. Let's go ahead and click in here, select it, and we'll turn it black so that we can see it. There we go. So here's our text. We've got two elements now on the screen. Uh-oh, we're cheating ahead as far as lectures. But that's what we've got. And if I wink out the thing up here on track name, everything disappears. If I lock things on the track name, everything is locked. So that's the way that these two controls work on track name. Now also, if I open up all the elements on track name, all the elements open up, and I can close them all. Now let's go here, select the text, right click and say delete, so we only have our penguin here. Now let's open up the penguin and we'll start looking at the animations and so on. You can't have a character without an effect going on. Or, I'm sorry, what are they called? An action. So you can't have it. Imagine, I stretch this out, which I can't do because there's no other actions. I can't have an action, a character without actions. So here he is being idle, and he kind of rocks back and forth. So if I want to extend the length that the penguin stays on the screen, right now, what is he? He's on for a second and a half. I would have to come here and say add another action of idle. And now he's on the screen idle for 3 seconds. Right? And he kind of rocks his head back and forth. Now I can shorten the penguin's duration, which actually truncates this second idle. So that's the way the characters work on the timeline. Let's look at more stuff on the timeline. So what have we covered? We covered locking, removing it from the timeline. We've got animations. Now, okay, here's the way you work with animations. If I click on here, it unselects the timeline. Now, if I click here, it reselects the timeline. And if I say add action, some action, like we don't want to get too far ahead because we're going to do animation in the next lecture. Let's make him happy. Okay, he adds happy, and let's see what he does when he's happy. Oh, he flaps his wings and so on. Let's zoom out so that we can see the entire, whoa, there we go, the entire video. And I can come here and I can play from here and see what the happy action looks like. Oh, isn't that nice? Now, once again, if I shorten this, it truncates the happy action. So there's no way to control the length of these animations. I can't take this and stretch it. I can go to it and I can delete it, and then happy stretches out. And I can truncate happy by shortening it up. But that's about all I've got control of. So you've got fixed characters. I'm going to look at the front of this 3D character, supposedly 3D, although I can't spin him. And I'm going to pick actions for him that come down here. Now, the other thing that I've got is I've got animations. So let's go look at animations for the penguin. Let's see, I got a scale animation. I've got a rotation animation. I've got a color animation. That's interesting. Let's see what those do. Now, this I can stretch out to the very end, although it's not doing it. Oh, I know why it's not doing anything. Okay, I forgot something. What I've got to do with animations as opposed to actions. Actions, now what they do is there's this is the standard position for a penguin. So he suddenly becomes idle. So he moves around, and then he comes back to the standard position to get ready for the next action, which is going to be happy. And he gets happy, and let's stretch this out so we see the full happy sequence. And then he comes back to this standard position again. This allows seamless transition from one action to another. Now, this isn't true of custom. If we come in here with the animation, let's stretch it out so it's the same length. Notice that I can change the length of the animations, but not the actions. Let's come here. I can come to the beginning. By the way, don't try and grab the very end of the bar. Grab the little dot if you want to stretch it. Notice it becomes left and right there. If you try and get over to the end of the bar, it disappears. So we're going to come here to custom. I'm at the beginning of custom, and Create Studio knows that. So I'm defining the things at the beginning of custom. And once again, I'm going to take a peek at let's just do one thing. What do you say? We'll get rid of color and rotation, and we'll take scale. So let's say we want this penguin to appear. Now he's going to do idle and happy at the same time. But at the very beginning of this animation, we're going to come over here, and there it is, scale. We're going to drop that down to 0. Notice the penguin disappears. He's now a scale of 0. But as we go to the end, he slowly appears and he goes through his happy dance. So that's kind of the difference between animations and actions down here on the timeline. And you have the two things. So with the animations, I can come in and I can look at them again with this little gear. So the other thing that we can do here is that this is the playhead. So as we grow this out, it plays along and it shows us what happens. Now, if we don't want the character to start appearing at frame 0, we can grab this whole stack, which we can close down, and move it out to where we do want the penguin to start doing its thing. Now, we once again talked about the fact that we can't stretch the penguin because it's a character and it needs to have actions. But if we have text, let's have that. This will start at the very beginning, and it's white. So let's come here and we'll make this text black. Okay, if we have text and that, then we come along, we've got text, 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 text. Now notice the text disappears here. We can take text and stretch it out because it doesn't have any actions associated with it. Actions are only associated with characters, and you need to fill up the length of the character bar with actions. Here we've got idle and happy get us all the way to the end. And you just keep. Now here's another thing. If I want it, let's click on the penguin and notice that neither of these actions are selected, and it's saying add action. So if I add action like pointing down, it adds it to the end because we didn't have any selected. And it also extends the character bar to subsume the new action. Well, let's get rid of that. The character bar comes down. Now I click on idle. So I've got an action selected. Now notice this little idle thing pops up, and I can replace the idle with doing the roly-poly and extends it out to put it in here. Let's see what this whole thing looks like. Here's our text, and he comes in doing the roly-poly, and he's happy. That's right. And that's pretty much the timeline. I don't think there's anything that I'm missing. Animations, so that's playing with the timeline. You line up everything to how many seconds you want things to be. You add actions to a character like the penguin to get it out as long as you'd like, with things like text or objects also too. If I bring in a rectangle, let's make that a different color than white. Red would be a good color for the rectangle. Then it can be stretched. So things like this can be stretched as far as the length. They can be moved. Anything can be moved. But the characters have to have actions to fill out their entire length. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is, let's go to here and notice our text and actually our penguin are gone. So what happens is what's on top is the layer that's on the top of this stack over here. So I've got shape on top. To put it on the bottom, I just grab it, I click on it, and I drag it down. And now the shape is on the bottom and the text and so on is on top. I can have the penguin behind the text, or I can have the text behind the penguin. So the order in which you layer these, or the order in which you position these layers is going to determine what's on top and what shows through and what overlays other things. So that's basically the timeline. I think we've covered the whole thing. Once again, if your timeline's really long, you can go left and right. The other thing that you can do is you can group layers to make things easy. Now, if you get a whole bunch of layers, this is one of the things. Let's add text, 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 text. So we've got a whole bunch of layers now. It's getting very complicated. Let's say we're only working on the top layer or the top couple layers. What I can do is I can go boom, 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 and then I can click this binocular and they disappear from the timeline. They're still on your animation, but you get rid of them from the timeline. So what I like to do is as I work on layers, I finalize them and then I lock them so they can't be modified, and then I wink them out so they're no longer in my timeline, so I don't have to deal with them. The other thing that I was going to point out, and we're going to talk about this later, is that I can create a layer group. Let's come here and right click. I can duplicate this text layer. I can delete it, and I can create a group. Now later we're going to talk about masking, but create a group, and now suddenly it's in a group. So I double click on the group, and it opens up and it shows me what's in the group. And notice that we've got this hierarchy, just the way that we do up here with the breadcrumbs on the characters. We have new group. And I can come back to the basic project. And the group, now let's open up new group. And I add a new layer. Let's add some more text layers. These are being added to the group. So when I condense the group, I don't see all of those layers. So grouping and taking this, I double click on it slowly and I can call it scene 1. So now I can group my layers into scenes, and notice you get the little arrows at the 2 corners. That tells you that it's a group. Notice this just saved. I have auto save. So let's go to advanced settings. I think that's where auto save is set. Yeah, here's auto save. So in the settings, this is one of the advanced settings that you got to do within the program, is I can pick how often it auto saves, and boy, this is a lifesaver. So it's by default, it auto saves every 5 minutes. So you don't need to worry about saving or losing your work too much. Anyway, back to here. Notice the arrows on either side. That means it's a group. So I just double click on it and it expands. Here's the contents of the group. So we're in main project scene 1, that group, and I can modify all of these layers. I can stretch them out. I can change what the text is in them. Let's go to this one and we'll... There's not text. Okay, I gotta be here. There we go. I come in here and I make this black. Oh, let's make it red. That's always fun. And I just click outside or I hit back to get out of that. And now I've got red text on this layer. And then I go back to main project and everything is grouped together under scene 1. Notice how it doesn't have one of the little arrows next to it. That's another indicator that you're working with a group rather than a layer. So that's the timeline. Okay, so that was everything. Amazingly enough, I think I explained everything there is had to do with the timeline. I'm sure we're going to run into more later. The timeline is typically complicated, but I think I've just made it fairly easy. We're going to run into more in the future, and we've just set up enough knowledge of the timeline to start with basic character animation. In fact, we cheated ahead a little bit. And see, I told you it's hard to separate bringing in a character, the timeline, and basic animation. So in the next lecture, we're going to talk about basic character animation. I'll see you there.